Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Artificial DM. Today, we're going to be covering a couple of RPG horror stories. This Frog Was No Prince Charming, by Lord Thrapplepur. I run a lot of homebrew 5es, seen my fair share of players. One comes to mind that takes the biscuit. I advertise on some groups that I'm starting a new campaign. Get some players, ask some questions, put together a group I think will work well together. I pitch some ideas for a campaign. They vote on a pirate-themed game. General concept is world is covered in waters from Water Realm to heal war-torn and broken land after big war. I draft up a world, story, all the works. They give me their character ideas and backstories. All is good. One eyebrow raiser was Bradley. Bradley wanted to be a grung. Odd choice to be a freshwater creature in a world covered by salt water, but whatever. I often rule on the concept of common sense when official rules are lacking. Anyways, it's what he wanted, and my golden rule as a DM is never influence a player on what they want to play. Bradley gives me a backstory. Average rogue's backstory, nothing special. 2 weeks later, I've written the campaign and incorporated backstories, so we're good to play. Starts in a tavern. Players roleplay to get used to their characters. Bad guy shows up, fight ensues. Now the juicy parts. Party is debating what to do next. They are hurt and more bad guys are coming. Bradley says, "Let's stand and fight." Party says, "That's not a good idea. They'll come in force next time." Bradley goes silent after being rather engaging for 20 minutes. They make a plan and politely ask Bradley for his input. His reply, "There's no point in me giving my opinion because you'll just ignore it." Red flag, red alert, red spy in the base. I speak up as a DM and say that the group decided together that your suggestion wasn't the best course of action. That doesn't mean you are being ignored. He gets real passive-aggressive for the rest of the game. Constantly making comments that I can see is making the group uncomfortable. I try to be fair, even giving him a small solo segment in the game as he scouts the enemy. But it doesn't work. He tries to steal a ship from the enemy on his own. I tell him it won't work because you need more than one person to operate a ship. "I am proficient in sea vehicles." Right, and with that proficiency, you would know you cannot sail the ship by yourself. You would need a group the size of the party. "Or I can trick the bad pirates to work for me. I'll use my disguise kit to blend into the crew." This is a fully human crew from what you've seen. Might be difficult to convince them, as you have no idea if they have any grungs in their crew. "But my disguise kit will hide me." You are a frog. Your disguise kit can make you look like another frog, but you are still a frog, and there are not that many of you on the seas. "I feel like this is something you should have told me before we started the game." What? That frog people are rare in a saltwater world? My apologies. I assumed you knew that. After that, he gets real moany. He fails his stealth roll, and the pirates see him while they are on fishing boats. He has a good swimming speed, so I describe how he skillfully gets away utilizing his skills, and he says, "What? That's it?" Yes, mate. We are playing a co-op game, not you're the main character game. I want to get back to the other party after spending 15 minutes on you. Anyways, more moaning and snide comments from Bradley directed at me and the party for the rest of the night. Session ends. Everyone except Bradley thanks me. Everyone messages me afterwards complaining about Bradley. I say I'm on it. I message him saying I liked his character concept, but his aggressiveness was utterly disrespectful and childish. I say if he wants to play, he'll never do that again. Didn't respond, so I kicked him. 7 months later, that same party finds that game the highlight of the week. So happy ending, really. While I do agree that Bradley is a butthole here, OP is also a bit of a butthole. He should have explained to the players that the entire world is covered in salt water, and maybe even explained what type of humanoids lived in the world. Creepy teenager tries to kidnap children and forces married women to marry him in-game. By J.D. Masters, 636. Context. This was my first time running a campaign. At the time, none of us had ever played D&D, and I, the now de facto DM for my group, offered to be the DM for our first real experience in Dungeons & Dragons. As I'll mention throughout the story, there is blame to throw around for both me and the player in question, so I'll try my best to be fair about the situation, but ultimately, I can only take one side so much. The characters. Me, the Dungeon Master. Patrick, my friend who I've known for a while. Kyle, my other friend who I've met because of Patrick, who still plays with me today. Greg, someone who I don't really talk to anymore, who is our lovely problem child in this story. For further context, I'll mention that we were all in middle school at the time. I don't remember what got us into D&D exactly. It's been around 6 or 7 years since the story, and I'm currently a freshman in college, still playing D&D with the same group, sans our problem child. Being that we were all inexperienced, I tried my best to make a somewhat engaging story as best I could. Looking back on it, a lot of my ideas for stories were lacking in actual driving forces, but I was lucky to have a group of players who were all willing to go along with anything I threw at them, because they didn't know how open-ended the world of D&D is. Because of the nature of D&D, instead of using books to a T, we decided to pull together some things from some of our favorite sources of media, with obviously some changes to accommodate the universe we were working in. An example, you couldn't play a Saiyan, but you could play a character who resembled one in appearance. Obviously, this is a terrible idea for anyone, but me being inexperienced, I didn't really know better. This leads to the party as follows. Patrick, who ended up playing a monkey character inspired by the mythology of Sun Wukong, naming himself Wukong. Kyle, who ended up playing a crystal genasi, although it's not what I now understand is a genasi, as it was closer to Crystal Head from Ben 10. And Greg, who I honest to paylore couldn't tell you what he played. As a way to inject my own characters artificially, and also create more characters to interact with the smaller party, I decided to over time give everyone a sort of partner character to create some more characterization and help everyone into role-playing, as it was my favorite part of playing D&D, still is. This started with Wukong, who after rescuing her from a burning house, saves a girl by the name of Annie who had lost her parents in the fire. Being similarly isolated, and him being the only one of his kind as far as we knew, he decided to take the girl and adopt her as a parent, and treat her as such, taking her on his adventures whenever he deemed it safe for her. Doing his best, obviously, when he was only in middle school, to be mature about the situation. Greg decided that this was unfair, because he too wanted a partner character, and in the middle of one of our sessions, as Wukong was doing something else, Greg decided to waddle over to me and whisper in my ear,
"I want to take the child."
This already struck me as weird in the moment, but knowing what was to come makes this really uncomfortable. He fails, because he is a fighter with no sleight of hand skills, nor any knowledge of kidnapping children. Naturally, Wukong sees this, and in real life tells him, "Hey bro, that's not cool, she's like my daughter." Greg insists that this is simply a misunderstanding, and that it won't happen again. It did. 4 times. He tried to kidnap this child from another player character 5 times in total before I caved and gave him his own character to take care of. Insert line, "You won't believe what happens next." Deciding that the father-daughter thing would be redundant to give to another player character, I decided instead something that would work better was instead a sort of mutual respect and friendship over skill level and position. So I created Jenny, who was a badass leader of a platoon of knights who would do as she said, which kind of tied into the situation they were in. Jenny was also married, to sort of sway Greg away from any ideas he might have, and to sort of reinforce the idea that they should have mutual respect. However, since I wanted to create a little more character for Jenny, I decided that as the party was getting to know her, she would be cursed by the BBEG, and her hands would be unable to carry a sword any longer. This also worked out for me, as the party needed a magic caster. She was sent into an infirmary to confirm that the curse was immovable, and she would be forced to learn spellcasting if she were to continue to be of use in combat. I did this specifically because the party lacked a caster in the group. It seemed fitting that instead of another clone fighter, they would have a definite caster for the group. Also because it didn't make much sense for the level 6 party to have what should have been a level 13 fighter in the party just running around. So instead, she could be a less experienced caster. At this point, I'd like to interject with some in real life stuff about Greg, because it's important to the end of the story. Greg was super obsessed with Dark Souls around this time, and the sort of gothic aesthetic of the series, which seems irrelevant at the moment, but it will be important later, I promise. It was also pretty well known that Patrick and Greg didn't really like each other prior to joining the group. They just never got on the same wavelength. We as a group thought that being a part of this D&D group might allow them to finally understand one another, or at least make them willing to put aside their differences to have some fun. Greg decided that this was his moment to shine in the spotlight, and decided that he was going to romance Jenny. This may strike some of you as weird, as I specifically stated she was married, but Greg didn't care. He coddles the seasoned warrior in her bed, as they attempt to rid the curse to no avail, and at this point, demands that I let him roleplay the both of them, as I had given the option to the other party members at various times. I agreed without thinking, and what ensues is easily one of the cringiest things I've ever had to witness in real life. He asks me to let him roll to make her divorce her husband. Nat 20. Me being the inexperienced DM allows this, as in my head, the dice ruled all, and so Jenny divorces her husband on the spot, and they become a couple. As the campaign continued, Jenny would be used as a sort of damsel in distress by Greg, as he attempted to protect her at all costs, even though she knew, almost exclusively, offensive magical spells as a wizard. The entire party continues to be annoyed about small things about Greg as the tensions grow, such as, he was never wrong in any scenario, constantly makes himself the main character, and would blame Patrick for any misfortune that would happen to him, even when Patrick wasn't there. This culminated in a literal straw that broke the camel's back when I scheduled a session and he didn't show up. I texted him over multiple programs and numbers, and he just never came to the session. Later that week he would learn of this, and despite being the only person to blame, decides to pin it on Patrick. Everyone in the party agrees to let him go from the campaign. His character would come back later as a one-shot villain, just so the party could have the satisfaction of killing him. Greg went on to create his own campaign, but instead of creating his own world using the D&D rule set, he, instead, decided to inspire a new system entirely based around Dark Souls, systems which included dodge and rolls, as well as mana and stamina feature. As far as I know, that only lasted a few sessions, before his group never came back together. I've since reconciled with Greg, and while we still don't talk much, this story still makes me laugh at how ridiculous it was, and it grows stranger to me every passing day. As an update, me and Kyle still play together to this day, with a few new faces, since Patrick joined the Marines after high school, and the group still plays to this day, 6 to 7 years later, except Greg. I think he stopped a long time ago. TLDR. A bunch of teenagers play D&D, and one of them thinks they're the main character, and tries to make everything about him, even if it means getting the girl who is already married and kidnapping a child to make it his lolly to protect. Talk about white knighting, but a scummy white knight. Selfishness at peak levels with this player. Granted, this was middle school though, so hopefully Greg has matured quite a bit over time. Maybe enough to give that Dark Souls RPG a try again. What did you guys think of the stories? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed them, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel out. That's gonna do it for today. And until next time, hope you feel inspired.